Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatam swakata krishnah punyashravana kirtanah hriyanto stihi bhadrani vidunoti suhrit satam. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya. Namaste Jastejase. Avir Bhava Vajjanaka Vajjadam Shrakarnasayan. Randaya Tamograsa Grasa. Om Swaha. Abhayam Atmani Bhuishta. Om Shraum. Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikeshandriyatmane. Namah Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibhatatmane. Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namah. Namah Hiranya Viryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave. So, Hare Krishna, thank you for joining us again. In today's, I think it's wise for us to reflect briefly on the previous session. And I was also wanting to maintain some continuity. And in an attempt to maintain some continuity, I was wanting to see if we could all be on a same, the same WhatsApp group, so that once the class is over, between one session and the other, there could be exchanges, and I could post certain questions, and you could also ask certain questions, and we could clarify our understanding. This way, we would be able to maintain our momentum from one week to the other. So I was wanting to share this with Mayapur, Madhava Prabhu, and Christina, but I just didn't have the time to do so this week. So I was wanting to just share it before we begin. So I think this would be something which we can do so that we can have an ongoing discussion during the week and clarifications can be offered. And this would keep the momentum going. And we would be very happy to keep in touch with the devotees during the week as well. And we could also keep topics in the group, in the WhatsApp group, which are, I would say, open. In other words, not necessarily pertaining to the verse that was discussed, but you could raise questions and doubts, and we would be very happy to assist. So in the previous week, we entered into the second chapter of the first canto. And what is significant about the second chapter of the first canto is the fact that it occurred in Naimisharanya. Srimad Bhagavatam is a multiple layer conversation. The conversation of Srimad Bhagavatam had occurred between Naranarayana Rishi and Narad Muni. It occurred between Sri Narad Muni and Srila Vyasadeva. It occurred between Srila Vyasadeva and Sukadev Goswami. It occurred between Sukadev Goswami and a small assembly of sages along with Parikshit Maharaj. And now the conversation which is nested and we are having now is a conversation between one of the attendees, Sutta Goswami, the original attendees who sat with Parikshit Maharaj, and sages who had gathered around in Naimisharanya. Naimisharanya, which is close to the foothills of the Himalayas, it is close to the foothills of the Himalayas, more closer to the northern side. And in Naimisharanya, what is so critical about Naimisharanya is that Naimisharanya is considered to be the center of the hub or the wheel of creation. In other words, just as much as if we were to chant the holy names and if we were to engage in activity which is extraordinarily auspicious, we engage in devotional service at Brahma Muhurta, which is the 1.5 hours before sunrise, then that particular Muhurta will have its effect on rest of the day, and it would carry its effect, and then we would have blessings through rest of the day. So that is a concept with which we also operate, and then we start with the first Sandhya. There are 3 Sandhyas during the day, and then there is one at midnight. 6 o'clock in the morning, 12 noon, 6 in the evening, and then 12 midnight. All these 4 junctions of time, which have 6 hours, are very, very significant because activities performed in those junctions have a tendency to carry potency towards the rest of the time. So our program is also designed in such a way that we have Brahma Muhurta, we have certain morning programs occurring during those times. And then we have the afternoon arati based on pastimes of the lordships, not necessarily based on the mystical aspect which we talked about in terms of, you know, the different junctions of time. Our aratis also occur during the pastimes, and, you know, there are different prayers uttered by the acharyas during different times. Then you have Sandhya Arati in the evening at 6, and then you have a midnight Sandhya, a junction of time in the midnight. So different activities prosper during different times. So in that sense, activities, very auspicious activities in the beginning of such junctions lend a lot of auspiciousness to the rest of the time in that particular junction. So in a similar fashion, there were two objectives. One was that it was the beginning of Kali Yuga. Being the beginning of Kali Yuga, things done right at the onset of Kali Yuga would have its effect throughout the Kali Yuga. So they were trying to transform an inauspicious time into an auspicious time. How do you transform something inauspicious? You introduce Krishna. It's a very simple concept. How do you transform life? You introduce Krishna. How do you transform a bad bargain? You introduce Krishna. See, if you consider life to be a bad bargain, introducing Krishna makes it extraordinarily auspicious. So in that sense, the sages gathered together at the beginning of Kali Yuga, and they were wanting to impose the extraordinary auspiciousness of devotional service into this Kali Yuga. As a consequence, they gathered around at the beginning of Kali Yuga. So this whole conversation took place at the onset of Kali Yuga to make Kali Yuga somewhat bearable and auspicious. Now, the other aspect to it is also a location, a place. If you were to choose a location which is critical in the construct of the overall universe, if you were to choose a place which is very critical in the construct of the overall universe, this particular place, Naimisharanya, is said to be the hub. It is said to be the center of the wheel of creation. As a consequence, being the center of the wheel of creation, it does have an effect on rest of creation. As a consequence, they wanted basically to increase the auspiciousness and increase devotional science in that particular area so that it would destroy nations and it would keep demoniac activity to a bare minimum in the rest of creation. So they chose that place. Yeah. So I was just thinking about it when I was just reading it, and I was reflecting, wanting to share. And I was thinking, Birmingham is the center of England. Am I right? Geographically, is this the center of England, Birmingham? Or I would say the Birmingham, wherever you are, is the center of England. Would that be an approximation which we can say is true or correct?
True.
Yeah. True?
True.
Yeah. Yeah. So if Birmingham is the center, if you have 24 hours kirtan and you do activities in Birmingham which are extraordinarily auspicious, you would then have a lot of auspicious spread throughout England. In other words, you know, you are in a critical spot. Yeah. Mayapur Prabhu is just reminding me that you're calling yourself the Midlands, I guess, Leicester and Birmingham. So you have much greater responsibility being in the center of the country than perhaps even London. So I'm suggesting that you also reflect on the fact that there's a greater responsibility. If you have 24 hours kirtan, then you are making the entire country auspicious because it is a center. In one sense, I'm just giving an example. We're drawing a principle rather than basing it on scientific fact from scripture. I'm just drawing a certain principle here. So that's the point, doing it in the center. So they chose Naimisharanya because it's going to have an effect on the entire creation. They chose the beginning of Kali Yuga, and everybody is assembled, and Sutta Goswami has been chosen. Why has he been chosen? You see, there's a lot of praise which is being rendered. One of the qualities of Sutta Goswami, they say, yes, you have had many spiritual masters, you have heard from many, but you are free from vice. You don't have any vices. You're completely pure. And at the same time, they also make a statement saying you're quite humble-hearted. Because you're humble-hearted, because you're humble, your preceptors, your gurus, they have bestowed upon you all kinds of auspiciousness in terms of transcendental knowledge and blessings. Because you carry such auspiciousness, then you have the ability to distribute it. So they're basically praising Sutta Goswami, also giving the qualities that are required for one to carry the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. One needs to be able to carry the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is a gift from the preceptors. It is a gift from the predecessor acharyas. The more one gets connected to the lineage, the greater the ability of that individual to receive. The greater the receiving, greater the ability to give. Because if our vessels are empty, what would we distribute if we have nothing to distribute in the first place? That would only be speculation. But then if we position ourselves in a very humble situation, and then we also have a need to distribute. We spoke about it the previous session, that you need compassion and you need to be humble. You need compassion because you will not see a need for preaching unless there is compassion. And you need humility, because without humility, we will not be able to receive the power necessary to make transformations. On our own, we don't have capacity to do anything, but if we have humility, then we have the ability to step aside. In fact, the science of preaching is the ability to step aside. One must practice the ability to step aside so that the Guru Parampara can use them. This is what is being spoken of in the early sessions of Bhagavatam. They're saying Sutta Goswami is an appropriate vehicle to share the transcendental science because he is humble-hearted. Because he was humble-hearted, his Gurujan, the Guru Varga, the lineage that he belonged to, they could bestow upon him all kinds of auspiciousness. You see? So both these qualities are required. So this is a very important principle if those of us who are wanting to spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya is to have the understanding that Mahamantra chanting is most important, because that gives us the gifts of humility and compassion, without which preaching is impossible. There will be no effect. Aindra Prabhu used to say this, yeah, you can see it in one of the videos. He used to say, if you don't got it, you don't got it. It's as simple as that, yeah. If you don't got it, you don't got it. So if you don't have it within us, if you don't have purity within us, if you don't have the power within us, then what are we going to distribute anyways? And how is it going to come? It's going to come through Mahamantra chanting. It is going to come through Harinam. It is going to come through Harinam, and it is going to come through the ability to step aside, knowing fully well that we are completely unqualified for this mission. Knowing to step aside is the ability to know that we are unqualified for the mission. And that allows us to move forward. Because if this mission and this particular enterprise, the whole aspect of preaching of Mahaprabhu's movement, if it were to depend only on our intelligence, God save us. It does not depend on our intelligence. It actually depends on the mercy of the Guru Parampara. And if they can't use us, we can't do much anyways. It's very limited. So working on ourselves to be able to step aside is the work that we need to do. We need to position ourselves to receive. Positioning ourselves to receive is our sadhana. Our sadhana will allow us to position ourselves to receive. And what is the sadhana that we are meant to do? Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, which is what we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss it. This is just beautiful because I'm going to read the series of verses, just the translation. This is beautiful because this is basically going in the same direction as the Bhagavad Gita. And you will notice it. Before expanding into the various personalities of Srimad Bhagavatam, you will notice that they're setting the stage. They are basically going to the crux of the problem. They're talking about Karma Yoga. So we'll just talk about it briefly. We'll touch upon the previous week's verse, and then we'll touch upon Karma Yoga. Then we will see how the Bhagavatam completely rejects what is mundane. It goes directly to the point, which is the difference between the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna takes it on a step-by-step basis. Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no wastage of time. It completely rejects what is not connected to the Lord and goes directly to what is supreme and what is connected to the Lord. So we will see those stages and we'll make comparisons. In the following week, we will focus on the modes of nature, because the following week, the Bhagavatam is going to focus on the modes of nature. So in this chapter, we're going to see a shift occur from first finding out what is the population supposed to do. So they're finding someone qualified. They're making him sit on the Vyasasana. His qualification is humility. His qualification is association with superior devotees with whom he has spent time. So they're seeing such a person, they're making him sit on the Vyasasana, and then everybody is eagerly sitting around him, and then they're wanting to hear from him as to what is the process for rest of the mankind. And this is a huge gathering. It is occurring at a very auspicious time and also a very auspicious place. So this is the previous setting. Now, Srila Sutta Goswami basically is beginning. So let's just begin with the previous week's statement, and then we will continue reading the verses. While we read the verses, we will also interject with our realizations and comments. So last week was this, text number 6, 1.2.6. Savai pumsham paro dharmo yato bhaktir jokshaje ahaituki apratihata yatma suprasidati. The supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So it is very much focused on dharma. Bhagavad Gita focuses on dharma. The ultimate conclusion is sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Srimad Bhagavatam begins exactly where the Bhagavad Gita ends. Srimad Bhagavatam is making this statement right at the onset. It is saying supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Manmanava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. 18.65 of the Bhagavad Gita, the most confidential knowledge. You see it right at the first chapter, second chapter here. Now, loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Now, we spoke briefly on unmotivated, ahaituki. There are two perspectives on unmotivated. Unmotivated means it is ahaituki, that which does not have a cause, that which does not have a material cause, that which does not have material motivation. If you have material motivation, it is like having a few grains of sand in a bowl of kheer. If you have a bowl of kheer and someone throws a few grains of sand, yes, you're going to be eating kheer, but you're also going to be munching on grains of sand, and it completely ruins and it's not going to be satisfactory. So unmotivated in this verse, ahaituki, has two meanings. First, means it has no material motivation. There cannot be contamination of material desires. Okay? Karma Mishra Bhakti, where someone has Mishra Bhakti. This is the platform of Mishra Bhakti. Someone has motivation to achieve something by engaging in the process of devotional service. You will see several live examples in the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is going to bring out different levels of bhakti. They're going to show you what is mixed devotion. They're going to show you what is mixed devotion due to karmic desires. They're going to show you mixed devotion due to desire for liberation, jnana. Okay, so you have karma mishra bhakti, which is mixed devotion, devotion contaminated by a desire to achieve something other than Krishna himself. I want to achieve X. As a consequence, I'm going to engage in deity worship. I'm going to chant the names of the Lord. This is Karma Mishra Bhakti. It is the platform of mixed devotional service. The second platform is Jnana Mishra Bhakti. I have understood that nothing in this world is worthy of achieving. The Jnani has understood that nothing in this world is worthy of achieving. As a consequence, relieve me from this body because I want to be liberated. I do not want to go to the heavenly planets. I do not want even the station of Lord Brahma. I want to go beyond the material sky because I have understood that even in the highest position, there's only misery in the material world. This is Jnana. But when you perform devotional service with the objective of wanting to leave the material world, it becomes Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Because now you're setting liberation as your ultimate goal. Krishna is not the ultimate goal. So please focus on the fact that both cases are contaminations. They are contaminations and they are mixed contaminations because in both cases, the objective is not Krishna. So this particular verse is saying it has to be unmotivated. There cannot be a material motivation. The second aspect of understanding this is ahaituki, bhakti, which is given to us, pure devotional service, has absolutely no material origin. Bhakti is independent. It is independent of Krishna. Bhakti comes from bhakti. Bhakti comes from the heart of the devotee who carries bhakti. Bhakti is independent. So this ahaituki, where it does not have a cost, costless mercy, is essentially that which can't be attributed to anything but its own sake. The devotee's heart has an abundance of bhakti. Srimati Radharani has the maximum amount of bhakti. When Lord Chaitanya comes in the mood of Srimati Radharani, the maximum amount of bhakti is in the heart of Lord Chaitanya. His depositing of bhakti into our hearts comes from the bhakti in his heart. So bhakti has its origin in bhakti. Now that's again the definition of ahetuki, unmotivated. There is no motivation. In certain ways, ahetuki, it is costless. It does not come from anywhere other than its own sake. So that's why listening from a devotee whose heart is filled with devotion essentially means that the devotion which is in the heart of the devotee is passed on to us, because Bhakti Devi comes from bhakti. Krishna and Bhakti Devi are independent. This particular topic also forms the first discussion in Madhurya Kadambini. This is also the first discussion in Srila Rupa Goswami's work, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's work. How do you understand bhakti? Bhakti doesn't have the origin. Bhakti comes from bhakti. So the heart of the Madhyamadikari Bhakta is essentially the origin of mercy, because the Madhyamadikari Bhakta is discriminating. He is looking and around wanting to distribute mercy. And when he is looking around wanting to distribute mercy, his bhakti is distributed from his heart. So the conclusion of our acharyas is that, number one, it has to be unmotivated. Unmotivated. There's a difference between all of this. There's a difference between motivation and motivated by material causes, either to have something material or to end the material journey. All of that is a contamination. What is the same verse which Srila Rupa Goswami uses? The proxy, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukuliyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Ruttama. This is the essence of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This verse is the essence. Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukuliyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Ruttama. The definition of Uttama Bhakti is essentially that which is not contaminated by desires to achieve things in this world. Neither is it contaminated by a desire to leave this world, as in liberation. There is neither Karma Mishra Bhakti, nor there is Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Neither of it is present. So here they are making a statement saying, yes, first of all, the supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain loving devotional service onto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Otherwise, we wouldn't be satisfied. Now, the other part which we're going to talk about is basically, we are going to discuss a few more verses in this regard. And we want to, in the previous session, we also spoke about Varnashram. What was the necessity for speaking about Varnashram? Anybody? Does anybody remember the discussion of the previous session? Why did we speak about Varnashram in this context? Feel free to speak up, no problem.
Hare Krishna, it's Lakshmi speaking.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
One of the points, so you mentioned about like in one life someone may be a Shudra, in the next life they'll go up to Vaishya, and then Kshatriya, and then Brahmana. But if we practice bhakti, then we don't have to go through those varnas to get to the mode of goodness.
True. So we're going to talk about it now further down. Exactly. This is the reason why we spoke of. We basically spoke of the fact that when one practices bhakti, they automatically transcend. But here we are talking about occupational duty. And there's a verse which follows, which is 1.2.8. I'm going to read that verse. Dharmaha swanastitaha pumsham visvakshena katasuyah notpadayedi ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. Shrama eva hi kevalam. This is the last part of this verse. Shrama eva hi kevalam. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. We're getting set up. In these few verses, we're actually getting set up to find out what is it one is supposed to do while they are functioning in this world. Regardless of who we are, regardless of our occupation, to some level, to some extent, we can be classified into one of the four varnas, our motivation of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Now, here Srimad Bhagavatam is making a statement saying the occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of God. Because ultimately, this is occupational activities are done very nicely for the purpose of liberation, which is what we spoke of. Occupational activities of a Shudra, when perfected, one graduates and becomes a Vaishya. When then one graduates as a Vaishya, he becomes a Kshatriya and then Brahmana. Then as a Brahmana, he develops motivation of wanting to get liberation. Until then, as a Shudra, the motivation is based on the modes of nature. The modes of nature a Shudra operates on are the mode of ignorance, and as a consequence, the desires of the Shudra and the motivation of the Shudra is sense gratification. That's the reason why when our motivation is sense gratification, we have to understand that this is Shudra quality. This is just Shudra, because a Shudra is in the mode of ignorance, and because he is in the mode of ignorance, he can only think of the body, and because he can only think of the body, his aim and goal in life is to engage in sense gratification, which is also the reason why a Shudra should never be kept hungry. A Shudra population should never be deprived of basic bodily needs. When Shudra population is deprived of basic bodily needs, revolutions begin. Because their basic needs are not being met, they start rebelling against the higher classes, and then they take over power, which is the whole aspect of the present climate in the world. The Shudra population's needs, if they're not scientifically met, if you don't meet the bodily needs of a Shudra, because the whole aim of a Shudra is centered around bodily existence, if it doesn't get satisfied, they would begin revolutions. All the revolutions we have seen so far is because the population became hungry. The population became hungry. Their basic needs were not met by the ruling classes. As a consequence, revolutions began. When revolutions begin, the Shudra population takes over governance. And because they are in the mode of ignorance, they don't have vision. Because they don't have vision, they set policies in government which are essentially not beneficial to anyone else. They only can set policies which are, basically governing the principles of sense gratification. Do we understand how critical it is to understand Varnashram? Is that the Shudras, if you deprive them of basic bodily needs, they would become rebellious. They would begin revolutions because that's all they have. They are only focused on the body. And when they start that, they would want to distrust the ruling classes, and the Kshatriyas would get deposed, and the Shudras will become the rulers. When Shudras become rulers, because they are in the mode of ignorance, they don't have vision. Because they don't have vision, they can only set governmental policy for sense gratification. Then they will ruin everything else. This is exactly why we face problems. Because there is an issue with providing resources. Who is taking away the resources? The Vaishyas. Because there's a lack of purity in the business class, there's an accumulation, hoarding, and lack of responsibility towards the rest of the population. The rest of the population, which is predominantly Shudra, suffers. And rulers in the ruling class start coming from the Shudra population just to represent themselves. Why? Because the business class basically are not doing their duty. When the business class is not doing their duty, it's because the Kshatriyas are not there to monitor the business class. The Kshatriyas are not monitoring the business class because the Brahmanas, who are supposed to control the lower modes, are themselves impure. You see, the modes of nature are such, in the following week, we're going to talk more deeply on it. The modes of nature are such that there's a certain hierarchy. The hierarchy of the mode of ignorance, mode of passion ignorance, Vaishyas, mode of pure passion, Kshatriyas, goodness, Brahmanas. Goodness controls rest of the modes. If goodness is not contaminated by rest of the modes, it has the ability to control rest of the modes. This is the reason why higher and higher and higher the position of the deities, greater their ability to control the rest. The mode of ignorance can't control the mode of goodness. It's the other way around. The mode of goodness controls the mode of ignorance. That's the reason why we start with Guru Puja in the morning. We want to introduce Guru, we want to introduce auspiciousness, we want to introduce transcendental goodness right in the morning, and it would automatically lend overbearing presence in the mode of ignorance throughout the day. This is how we manage the modes. We manage the modes by activity at certain specific junctions, which is very scientifically done. If it is done well, if it is done with devotion, you manage rest. So this is very critical. So occupational duties are by one's nature. One's nature is based on the modes of nature, wherever they are. So all of this is termed as completely useless labor by the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shrama eva hi kevalam. Shrama eva hi kevalam. And why is it Shrama eva hi kevalam? There's just useless labor because it does nothing. It does nothing. Just acting according to the occupational duty does nothing because you're simply operating according to the Vedic paradigm. Srimad Bhagavatam is now talking about something beyond the Vedas. It is talking about the ultimate conclusion of the Vedas. It is talking about transcendental service to the Supreme Lord. And as a consequence, the Srimad Bhagavatam is terming everything which has been spoken of in the Vedas as simply useless labor. Shramayeva kevalam. Discarding all of that activity. It is saying if you don't redesign your future, if you don't redesign your future, and if you don't reach a new understanding of what you ought to be doing during the day, it is just useless labor. It is just useless labor. It is useless labor. Occupational duty based on one's nature is useless labor if one does not develop a deeper yearning and attraction for the personality of Godhead. It's useless labor. This is the conclusion of Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is discarding this entire process of regular varnashram, saying, useless. It is Shamayevi Kevalam. All you're going to do is go from one particular step in the material universe to another. And that is just useless labor because it doesn't really provoke any attraction for Krishna. Whatever is within the material universe is just rejected by the Bhagavatam. It is saying, we want to talk about transcendence. We want to talk about Krishna. And Krishna is beyond the material universe. If your activity during the day and your activity in life is not designed to provoke an attraction for Krishna, it is Shramayeva hi kevalam. It's such a powerful, very disturbing message in a powerful way. It is basically saying your activity is useless, does not matter what you do, even if you're a Brahmana, it really doesn't matter what you do if your activity does not provoke an attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's very powerful, this particular message. They're not mincing words. Srimad Bhagavatam in the second chapter is not mincing words. We hear these conclusions through the Gita towards the end. In Bhagavatam, we are hearing this conclusion right at the onset in many ways. Right from the word go, the Bhagavatam does not want to involve itself with mere progression from Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana. It does not want to involve itself with the idea of leaving the world. It has absolutely no motivation other than wanting to glorify Krishna and bring us closer to Krishna. Now we're going to talk about it further, but I was just wanting to say as to how definitive and no nonsense is this approach, that right at the beginning, it's not taking any nonsense. You're not talking about how to progress in material life. It is not talking about how you transform consciousness from one stage to the other and then promote yourself from being a Shudra to a Vaishya. It is rejecting all of that and saying, all of this is just useless labor, regardless of who you think you are, if you don't have an attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. So it's just throwing everything into the dustbin and saying, forget about all of that. Let's start afresh, because we're going to provide a new understanding of how life should be led. Isn't it quite dramatic? It's actually very, very dramatic, very no nonsense. So right at the beginning, Sutta Goswami, he's doing away with the conclusion. He's doing away with all the fruitive activity aspect of Vedas. Fruitive activity is basically promotional. It is promotional. Yeah, it is promotional, going from one stage to the other. Now let's look at the next verse. Dharmasya hi apavargasya anartho ritiyo pakalpate anartasya dharmai kantasya kamo labhaihi smritaha. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. So here they're saying there's a difference. There's a difference between a person who is progressing on the ladder of promoting himself from being a Shudra to Brahmana to eventually leaving the world. And when you are doing that and when the understanding is present, then you should not engage in material activity either, because that's outside of this world. If you want to have an objective which is outside of this world, then don't engage in activity which is going to gratify the senses, because you're going to get pushed down. Okay? Now let's go further. Text number 10. Kamasya indriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jignasa anartho yascheha karma bihi. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So self-preservation is not considered to be interfering with pure devotional service. So Srila Rupa Goswami, he is saying Anya Bilashita Shunyam. He does not say Anya Abhilasha Shunyam. There is Anya Abhilashita. The word ita, or extension of Anya Abhilashita, essentially allows for self-preservation. It is not considered to be interfering in devotional service or the objectives of devotional service. Self-preservation as in protecting oneself. Self-preservation as in ensuring that you have a healthy life and a healthy body, making sure that you have some healthy food and then eating and then resting for some time. All of these are self-preservation activities. These essentially are self-preservation activities that are essential for one to be able to serve. It is not considered to be interfering. It is not considered to be interfering with pure devotional service. That's why Anya Abhilashita is used. So the example used by our acharyas is that in Vrindavan, so their context was different. In Vrindavan, those days, essentially Vrindavan is forest. Yeah? The 12 forests, it's one of the forests basically. And in Vrindavan, if someone were to come across a tiger, in these days you don't come across tigers, unfortunately. You come across all kinds of things but tigers. But then those days it is written, if you somehow or the other while crossing, going from Vrindavan to Govardhan or Sri Radhakund, you bump into a tiger, offering prayers to Narasimhadev is not considered an interference to pure devotional service. Our offer of prayers to Narasimhadev, asking him to protect us, is not considered interference to pure devotional service. So this is the context in which self-preservation is explained by our acharyas. Anya Bilashita, where you can have certain motivations for good health, provided it doesn't extend itself to sense gratification. Preservation of good health is required so that we could engage in devotional service. Vadanti tattvavidas tattvam yad jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. We'll go further. Text 12. Tashraddhayan munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyanti atmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitya. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Because the conclusion of all the Shruti is to engage in devotional service. So, text 13. Ata pumbir dvijashreshta varnashrama vibhagasaha swanustitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. This is the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan shatvatam patihi shrotyaha kirtitvascha deha pujyascha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Text 15. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? Now, this is the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam bhaja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi ma suchaha. Do not fear. The conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita is being discussed here right at the onset, because they are basically saying that if all you're going to do is engage as a Shudra, if all you're going to do is engage as a Brahmana, engage as a Kshatriya, if you're just going to act according to your motivations without having any scope for developing attraction for the personality of Godhead, then your whole progress in life and the time you spend in life is just useless. Now, does anybody have any clue as to why this statement is being made? Because it's very confusing. If you actually look at it, it can be confusing, because aren't we supposed to do our duties as a Kshatriya, as a Brahmana? Aren't we supposed to execute our duties in the Grihastha in the Sannyasa ashram? Then what is it which is being conveyed here right at the onset in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srimad Bhagavatam is saying that if all you're going to do is act according to the ashram and the varna, shramayeva hi kevalam, your labor is useless. So what is it which they're driving at here? What exactly? How does one engage in activity which is useless? Go back to the verse that was discussed last week. I'm giving you a clue. Go back to the verse that was discussed last week. Last week we said that devotional service to satisfy the self has to be unmotivated by material desires, and it also has to be uninterrupted, apratihata. Remember, uninterrupted. Now think about that, and then think about the conclusion of the Bhagavatam, which rejects the varna and the ashram as defined in the Vedas, if it is not involved or centered around Krishna. It is rejecting that. So please think about these two conclusions. Does anybody have any thoughts to share on why is Srimad Bhagavatam rejecting? Why is Srimad Bhagavatam rejecting? Go back to the verse that we spoke last week, 1.2.6. Go back to that verse. Now we are in 15, but go back to 6. Why is Srimad Bhagavatam rejecting? Remember the two qualities. Number one, unmotivated. Number two, uninterrupted and satisfying to the self. I'm going to give a pause here. Just want to see if there's any input, please. No input? I'll give another 10 seconds. It's okay for you to speak, and it's okay for us to be a little bit off the mark. It's perfectly fine, because everything is going to be valuable.
Hare Krishna, it's Lakshmi speaking.
Yes.
Is it something to do with mixed motivations? So, like, when we're doing our occupation duties, so if ultimately we've got a lot of material desires, so we could be using our occupation more for Krishna consciousness. Is it something related to that?
Yes, and I'll just expand on it. Let's just see if there's anybody else who can comment on it as well, and then I'll expand on it. Yes, to some extent, yes. I'll expand on it. Anyone else wants to try? The clue to understand this, one needs to understand what happened at the onset of the Kurukshetra war. Where was Arjun's confusion coming from? What was his confusion? He was engaging in the occupational duty of a Kshatriya. Where was the issue? Where was the issue for Arjun?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
it was issue he was associating himself with the body.
Body, yeah.
With the body, yes. And basically, what does it mean when you associate with the body?
He thought he's a controller as well.
Yes, but then the main point which you want to use here is dharma. Activity, for you to perform a certain kind of activity during the day in this world, you need an identity. Without an identity, one cannot understand duty. If one does not understand their identity with relationship to the job, if they don't understand what they are meant to do, and there's a certain job description associated with that particular position, then you have a position at work. Someone could be a manager, someone could be a representative of something. The point which I'm talking about is if you don't understand the specific description, job description, and the identity of that particular position, it is very difficult to be efficient in that particular role. If one does not understand fully well, and they don't embrace their role as, for example, a husband or wife or father or mother, they can't engage in dharma of that particular identity. Dharma, activity comes after you establish an identity. Activity comes after you establish an identity. So when someone has a child and they go out and they're working in the world, the child could be home and they have a relationship as a father or mother with the child. But when they're working out in the world, they don't forget that they have that relationship at home. They're still working in a different identity, different capacity in the workplace, but they don't forget that they are a father or mother. They remember that. There's a duty there. Yeah? Can everybody put yourself on mute, please? So they remember the fact that they are a father or mother even at work. So what does this do to someone who is working when they remember that they're parents? What does it do to someone who is working? What do they want to do? When someone remembers that they're parents or they're husband or wife when they're working, what does it do to them when they're at work? When you are at work, even if you're not exactly in front of your family, you remember the family and you engage in work according to the needs of the family. Nobody wants to work, otherwise you would be working Saturday and Sunday as well. You're off today and tomorrow because you don't really enjoy working all 7 days of a week. It's a fact. Yeah? We want to take breaks because it's not fun. We do want to take breaks. When we are at the workplace, we remember the family because we are wanting to provide for the family. So the identity of being a father or a husband or a wife or a mother is far bigger than the identity of a professional because it can motivate one to do certain things. Sometimes people say, I want to spend more time with the family, so I'm cutting down the work hours. I want a job which is a little easier. Why do you do it? You do it because you have another identity which is competing with the identity of a professional. You have the identity of a parent competing with the identity of a professional. So you have the capacity. Today, every one of us has the capacity to assume one identity internally, be fixed in it, while we execute work in some other identity. Does everybody agree? That while you're at the workplace, you're doing it for something else altogether. While you're at the workplace, you're doing it for something else altogether. You work because you want to provide for something else. You are working because you want to provide for some other identity. Isn't this the case with most of us? Unless you're in some kind of a very, very fun job, yeah, which is very closely involved with your heart. Whatever work you do it with motivation that it is going to accomplish something else for you and basically going to feed some other identity. So in other words, there are multiple identities competing for attention all the time in this world, right? So now think of this verse in the context where you are employed and you're engaging in activity, you are acting according to your motivation, you're also operating within one of the ashrams. Think of this as being in any one of these, but doing it for Krishna. That makes a difference. Does it make sense? We do things very easily as parents and spouses and so on. It's very difficult to go to work and do things for Krishna. It's largely theoretical. It's largely theoretical. And the Bhagavatam is saying, because satisfaction of the self should never be interrupted, my role as a husband, mother, father, so on and so forth, is going to be interrupted. If you're going to invest a lot of time and energy into something that is going to be interrupted because of this body, then that is nothing but useless labor. What is also being said is that you could be in this world in any one of the varna and ashrams, but if you have established a relationship with Krishna, then you are going to be in this world with Krishna in your heart, doing everything externally and being completely unaffected by the work that you do. Does it make sense that if your establishment of, if your identity with Krishna in the spiritual sky is well established, if you know your relationship with Krishna, if you know which street in Vraj you were born in, if you knew the specific name of your father and your mother in Vraj, if you knew your gender in Vraj, in the eternal spiritual sky, if you knew your occupation in daily service of the divine couple and Krishna's friends on a daily basis, if you knew all of this and that identity is so powerful, will you not be thinking about that all the time while you supposedly engage in activity in this world? Yes or no?
Yes, Hare Krishna. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. You would constantly be thinking about your eternal identity because you already know it. You can't pretend that that doesn't exist. It's a reality. The simple fact is it's a reality that we don't know it. That's the only problem. We are not aware of it. We have an inkling. We have certain attractions, but we are not clear. If you knew your eternal identity of being a part of Braj, being a part of Nandagaon, or being a part of some place in Braj, knowing exactly which place you're born in, which is what is the connection with Krishna, if you knew all those details, you could be anything in any part of the world. You could be any varna, any ashram. You will be engaging in activity, but all the results of such work would go to the lotus feet of Krishna because you are constantly being absorbed in his memories. Just as much as if you are a parent or you are a spouse and so on and so forth, you go to work in this world, but you do so with different objectives. You do not go for the sake of work. You go and you do things thinking that it is going to take care of something else. In a similar fashion, when you know your eternal identity, you will engage in activities of this world. At the same time, the activities of the world won't have any influence on you, and because you're going to ultimately depart and then go back to serving Krishna wherever you ought to. It will have no effect on you at all. This is the message of the Bhagavad Gita as well. Why was Krishna why was it so important when you observe the Bhagavad Gita? How could Arjun, who was seething with all kinds of rage before the war, wanting to kill Duryodhana, wanting to kill Karna, there was such rage in the Pandavas, Arjun specifically. How could this person who was enraged by the humiliation they suffered, how could he become so timid on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? It was the arrangement of the Lord. It was an arrangement of the Lord's potency, where Arjun became bewildered by the Yogamaya potency. Arjun became completely bewildered. He forgot everything. Why did Krishna engineer such consciousness in Arjun? Why did he engineer this? It was not bewilderment of Arjun. It was just a situation where he was bewildered. How could you be bewildered when Krishna is in front of you? How could you be bewildered when Krishna is right in front of you and you have a relationship with him? Eternal relationship. Arjun was bewildered. He forgot everything. He lost his composure. He gave up and he did not want to fight. He didn't want to do his duty because he was completely bewildered as he was assuming different identities of relationships. He became a real timid personality. The whole rage of a Kshatriya and the anger that he came with, it was all just disappeared. It just disappeared. He lost all objectivity while coming there. Why did Krishna put Arjun in such a situation? It was a benediction. Krishna put him in such a situation so that he could educate him. And after educating him on understanding that you should focus on the relationship with me, Krishna said, focus on the relationship with me. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi masucha. Arjun, focus on this relationship with me. Because as you are on the battlefield and you're firing arrows and millions of soldiers are going to be killed, if you start assuming any other identity than being a servant of mine, you would basically have to take on intense sinful reactions for killing so many. It is not a joke. Millions die. So many families were put into grief in that battle. So many families, innumerable families were put into deep grief in that battle. All that responsibility will come on those who participate in it, identifying with matter. But if you identify with Krishna and understand that you're doing it on behalf of Krishna, then there are no reactions which Arjun could take. It's very intense karmic reactions. Krishna saved him by educating him and putting him in the spot right at the beginning, saying, understand that you're here and you're going to do a duty, and it is going to be done in the identity of being my servant. You're not Bhishma's grandson. You're not the cousin of Duryodhan. You're not the disciple of Drona. You are my servant. Go and engage in this world. Perform your occupational duty. And by keeping me in mind and acting on my orders, then there will be no reaction at all. So now that is the whole purpose that is being driven home here. What is being driven home is, if you simply engage in occupational duty without developing an attraction for Krishna, we will always be acting in the identities that are obvious to us. We will be acting as father, mother, son, brother, husband, wife. And every one of these identities are filled with karmic reactions. They are filled with all kinds of obstacles. So the path towards progress of the soul would also be halted. So the Bhagavatam is making a clear message saying, develop an attraction for Krishna. By developing an attraction for Krishna, by ensuring that you are going to become more and more Krishna conscious, the extent to which you know your position in relationship to Krishna, to that extent your journey on this planet is going to be fruitful. Because you will keep him in your mind. You see, there was this book that I came across. It is called Preyo Bhakti Rasarnava. Preyo Bhakti Rasarnava. It is written by a devotee who came in the lineage of Sundarananda Gopal. Lord Nityananda, when he appeared 500 years back, he had 12 primary associates. The cowherd boys from Goloka, they descended, and the 12 primary cowherd boyfriends of Balaram descended, and they became the 12 primary cowherd boy associates of Lord Nityananda while he was preaching. One of the associates of Lord Nityananda from the spiritual planet, but here during Gaur Leela, was Sundarananda Gopal. So there was a devotee who came in the lineage of Sundarananda Gopal, and his occupation in Bengal at that point in time was that he was a panwala. He was basically a panwala. He was selling pan. Yeah. So he used to have a cart, and if you're in India, especially in North India, you will see the panwala with a cart with multiple vessels and pots, betel leaves, different kinds of spices. And people go there, and you see in North India specifically, everybody's mouth there's something or the other. Literally all the time people are chewing. It's incredible. It's incredible. They're chewing betel leaves. So he was a Panwala, this Gopal, Panuya Gopal. He came in the lineage of Sundarananda Gopal, in the associate of Lord Nityananda. And this Panuya Gopal, he had an eternal identity of being a cowherd boy. So that's the only book that you will find which describes cowherd boy pastimes. It's not very easy to find cowherd boy pastimes. You can find pastimes of that associated with the associates of Srimati Radharani. Because you have so many of our acharyas writing, the Rasika acharyas writing about their basic experiences in serving the divine couple. But you don't find many cowherd boy descriptions. This is one of the very rare works. This is called Preyo Bhakti. Preyo Bhakti means that which is associated with the bhakti of cowherd boys. Vishramba. Vishramba means where these cowherd boys treat Krishna as an equal. They scold him, they ride on his shoulders, they ask him to massage their legs. They see no difference between themselves and Krishna. They take something from their own mouths and put it into his mouth, saying it's tasty. Krishna eats it with relish. Because if you don't have equality, then what is the meaning of friendship? Vishramba means to be equal. Yeah? Vishramba means to be equal. Preyo Bhakti is bhakti that is associated with this particular mood of being a cowherd boy, a Saka of Krishna. So this Panuya Gopal, he was a Panwala, and he used to have a cart filled with spices and betel leaves, and he used to distribute these betel leaves and spices in some part of Bengal. He wrote a book called Preyo Bhakti Rasarnava, and his story is also quite amazing. What he used to do early in the morning during Mangalati, he used to empty all the pots in the cart. Every pot which had something to do with pan, like pan masala, spices, betel leaves, he used to empty all of those, clean all of them, fill them with ingredients that are required for pure devotional service, because his deities also used to be in the cart. He used to offer the deities full devotional service and worship with the same pots. And then the pots used to get filled with ingredients for distributing pan, betel leaves. So this Panuya Gopal basically used to be immersed in the activity of engaging in pure devotional service to such an extent that he had written such an amazing Ashtakaliya Leela, 8-fold pastimes, or basically the pastimes of the cowherd boys with Krishna during different times of the day, that is very beautifully described in the book. And he wrote that whilst being a betel leaf seller in Bengal. How does this happen? How does this happen that someone goes so deep into Rasika literature, literature which is associated with Sakyaras? How do you write pastimes of Krishna with cowherd boys with such authority while you're selling pan in the streets of Bengal? That happened because this Gopal knew who he was in the spiritual world. In this world, he was selling pan. He was distributing betel leaves. In the spiritual world, he was a cowherd boy in the association of Balaram. He knew exactly what the cowherd boy pastimes were. So even though he was distributing pan, it did not affect his ability to connect to the transcendental pastimes. And he authored a book for someone with that occupation. Can you imagine? Quite fascinating. This is what Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about. Develop an attraction for Krishna. Once you develop an attraction for Krishna and you become closer and closer and come closer and closer to your eternal identity in Braj, in eternal Braj. This is eternal Braj. We are in Vrindavan now. This is eternal. There is no difference between this Vrindavan and that Vrindavan. There is no difference at all. It's a matter of consciousness in terms of being able to see what's going on around us. It's a matter of consciousness. So when one develops this interest and deep interest of wanting to basically come closer and closer to their eternal identity in Braj, after coming in touch with a bona fide spiritual master in our lineage from Mahaprabhu, then such a person has already developed an attraction for the messages of Krishna. Such a person executing their occupation in this world will yield results simply because in their heart they have Krishna. They are planning all the time of how to come closer to Krishna. Then the work that they do will have no reactions whatsoever. Otherwise, it is just Shamayeva hi Kevalam. It is just Shamayeva hi Kevalam. If you're going to set objectives in the world that are distinctly associated only with the world, whilst not contributing to your eternal identity, Shamayeva hi Kevalam. It's just useless labor. This is the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita as well. Such a powerful verse. It is about occupational duty. How do you manage your occupational duty? Is it important for you to be doing what you're supposed to do? The answer is yes. Are you supposed to be efficient in the Grahasthashram? The answer is yes. You're supposed to try your very best, tolerate the circumstances, and then give the results and accept the results of whatever Krishna offers. Whatever Krishna gives you, that is the result. Offer all the results of your work to Krishna. This is what you're supposed to do. So this is not discouragement from duty. But if this is all we are going to do, it's useless labor. On the other hand, we develop an attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead whilst engaging in this kind of varna and ashram stuff. Then we are truly fortunate, because we would make true progress, because our objectives now have been set far beyond the material world. Now, how do you develop an attraction for the message and for personality of Godhead Krishna? That is the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is all about allowing us to develop an attraction for Krishna. Okay, let's look at the next few verses and we'll end after that. Sushrushoho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchihi Chan Mahat Sevaya Vipraha Punya Tirtha Nisevana. Or twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. How do you develop the ability to hear? Hearing comes because one has served. When one serves devotees, they develop the ability to hear. Such a powerful connection. When one serves the Vaishnavas, they develop an ability to hear. It's a direct connection. When one is serving the Vaishnava, then they develop their ability to hear. Why is this so? Anybody? Why is this connection being made? By serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva.
Hare Krishna, is it because we get bhakti from bhakti, so we develop our own bhakti by associating with someone who has bhakti, and also from I suppose their mercy?
Absolutely, exactly. This is simply because the origin of bhakti is bhakti, and bhakti is in the heart of the bhakta. The origin of bhakti is bhakti, and it is found in the heart of the devotee. And when one serves the devotees, then Bhakti Devi, on her own accord and also due to the mercy and the will of the devotee, descends into our heart and we make progress. It's a very, very beautiful, beautiful connection. You serve, and then once you serve, you will develop a motivation to hear. If you hear, then which is the next verse? Let's look at the next verse. 17. Yes, please.
Yes, Padmavati in the time of Tadasi Prabhu. Prabhu, I just wanted to ask you, even with I remember myself when I came to Krishna consciousness a very long time ago, but I have not served any devotees, but I really always I wanted to go and hear. So that could be the mercy of the devotee, the speaker. That's what you think. How could you describe that?
Well, if you say that you haven't served anyone,
perhaps because
Go ahead, finish, please finish.
Sorry, I haven't served because at the beginning, I have not served anybody, but I really wanted to go and sit down and hear, and I just wanted to hear. So what I want to understand is maybe that's the mercy I'm getting from the devotee without any qualification from my side. Is it
There are
one?
two causes. Yeah, there are two causes described in Shastra.
Okay.
Two causes. One we can understand is that you have to observe your life in continuum. If you look at your life as a snapshot, thinking that you have begun devotional service in this lifetime, then that may not render clarity in terms of when you offer service to receive such mercy. So the answer is yes, your thought is correct that you are receiving mercy, but the mercy could be mercy that you are receiving because of two reasons. Number one, it could be because you already rendered service in the past, because of which you developed an attraction that you can't remember. Number two, you could be rendering service without even realizing that you are serving, and as a consequence, someone is giving you mercy. So I'll give you this example, and I've shared this before. There was this situation where Srila Prabhupada was traveling in an airplane, and the disciples of Srila Prabhupada completely forgot to pack prasadam. So once the flight was on, and Prabhupada turned around and told his disciples, the servants who were traveling with him, I want to eat. Where is my prasadam? Then they looked around and looked at each other's faces, and they found that they had forgotten the prasadam packet at the temple, wherever they left. So this was very confounding. It was very disturbing because they didn't have the ability to take care of Prabhupada. Then there was this air hostess who was in the flight, who obliged, and she saw Srila Prabhupada dressed in saffron. He was, the way he was. And she very carefully bought an entire platter of fruits for him from first class so that he could have fruits. And that was it. That was her connection of service to Srila Prabhupada. Years later, after the departure of Srila Prabhupada, apparently devotees, while distributing books in South America, they came to a little unknown village where they entered a house and they found that this Mataji was there with a lot of Prabhupada's books and quite blissful, practicing Krishna consciousness, but not with real association. It was that air hostess. The air hostess basically came in touch with devotional service because she took some extra trouble and care in wanting to serve a pure devotee, even though she had no knowledge that such service would beget the glorious aspect of coming in touch with pure devotional service. So we really do not know where we get the good fortune. That's one explanation. Second is, we also should remember that our devotional service is in continuum. In some cases, it has begun in this lifetime. In some cases, it may have begun in previous lifetimes. And there could be some service that was rendered then, which is just continuing the momentum.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Sure. So, text 17. What was the topic? How, the first line that we read, the first verse, if you serve devotees, you develop the ability to hear. Then text 17. Shanvatam swakata krishnaha punyashravana kirtanaha hridayantostihi badrani vidunoti suhrit satam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Krishna himself cleanses desire for material enjoyment, in the sense the practical aspect of us being able to come closer to our eternal identity is initiated by service to a devotee, and by serving a devotee, one develops an urge to hear, and when one is hearing and sincerely hearing, Krishna, who is in the heart, starts cleansing the desire for material enjoyment, then we make even further progress. This is the conclusion which is being given here. In the coming week, which is the week now, we will talk about what is the nature of desires that have to be cleansed. We will also talk about the modes of nature. So to quickly summarize today's session, we spoke a bit about the previous week. We touched upon the fact that devotional service has no material cost, is independent because bhakti is independent, and is also needs to be uninterrupted. In other words, there should be no material motivation, and it should also be uninterrupted for it to really give satisfaction. We then extended the principle of the next verse, which spoke of the fact that when you're engaging in occupational duties in this world, those occupational duties are based on the body. And that occupational duty, once the body is finished, that duty is over. So it's nothing but useless labor, because you may make progress, but ultimately that progress, you have to start all over again at some level. So it's shamayeva hi kevalam, occupational duties, without being able to hear Krishna's messages, are nothing but shamayeva hi kevalam. Okay. Now we also heard the next part of it, of what is it which we ought to do for us to be able to move forward. How can we become Krishna-centered? Because acting in this world in an occupational duty whilst being Krishna-centered is the way to move forward. How do we do it? And the way we do it is by being able to develop an attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And developing an attraction for Krishna is done through the service of a devotee, who then motivates us to basically hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Krishna in our heart cleanses our desire for material enjoyment, brings us closer so we could know who we are. So we gave the example of the devotee in Bengal who was a betel leaf seller, but whose eternal identity in the spiritual sky was so established that he wrote a magnificent work on the relationship of Krishna with the cowherd boys. Whilst distributing so-called betel leaves, he was doing that. So the occupation didn't really impact him. He was completely centered on his occupation and his attention and his identity in the spiritual sky. So we gave that example. We also spoke a little bit about how the whole process of devotional service is to establish that identity. Because once you establish that identity, you could be working, but then you will not be distracted just as much as while we are working in the world today, we don't forget while we are at the workplace that we have multiple identities. We work for the family, we may work for some other purpose. So we don't forget that. In a similar fashion, as deeper and deeper our identity becomes in Krishna's service, greater our ability to move forward, because everything that we do here, there would be no reactions whatsoever, and everything would also contribute at some level to our eternal identity. So we'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Haribo.
So, Dore Chandra Das.
Haribo.
A couple of questions, Prabhu. So obviously from the class comes to mind, obviously, the importance of obviously serving devotees, getting their association. Then is it also important to realize how by serving the devotee we get bhakti, but at the same time, if we cause offenses, then there can be a hindrance as well.
So when you're serving the devotees, there's an opportunity, because you obviously have to serve the devotees, which is the message of the Bhagavatam. But you're saying that whilst we do it, we could be committing offenses. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, as in we have to be careful at the same time, because we could commit offenses. So that could, again, be a hindrance.
Certainly. Being mindful and being sincere and requesting help before serving devotees is very important. We should never take association of senior devotees lightly. We should approach those who are senior to us in a very prayerful mood. And this prayer can be internal. There can be an internal prayer requesting Krishna and Guru to help us so that we can take maximum advantage of association. Devotional service is dynamic. Aspects of devotional service are dynamic. The more mental energy we put into aspects of devotional service, greater would be the yield of results. The more mental energy that's being put in deity worship, greater would be the impact. The more mental energy that is being put in absorption and reading Shastra, greater would be our ability to absorb ourselves in the mind. Greater mental energy in chanting, and so on and so forth. The yield would be better. So if there's a necessity, there is a necessity for us basically to be very prayerful when we approach Vaishnavas. That is how we protect ourselves. So we don't run away from service, but we be prayerful.
Thank you.
Any other question, comment?
So what is actually considered an offense to a Vaishnava? Like, not obviously the physical side, but what kind of offenses, what is an offense to a devotee?
What is considered an offense to a devotee? The extent to which we are conscious of our body, to that extent we are going to be offensive to the Vaishnavas. Because we are going to be putting ourselves first in our service in the relationship. By putting ourselves first in the service in the relationship, we automatically would begin a relationship on the platform of selfishness instead of selflessness. What is considered to be an offense is a very broad statement, because there can be so many different offenses that can be committed. So many different offenses. See, we don't want to fixate ourselves on categories of offenses. We want to fixate ourselves on the primary motivation of wanting to serve sincerely. So the positive wanting to serve very sincerely in the heart would create amicable mental state, which would also assist us in serving nicely. Does it make sense? This is taking away from focusing on what not to do rather than focusing on what to do. If you focus on the positive of wanting to reinforce nice service, wanting to be situated in such a way that you could serve nicely, Krishna will give us the intelligence to not commit offenses. Because you can't really say that, this is an offense, that is an offense, because there can be so many offenses that can come up in so many different ways. So we don't want to do that. We basically want to focus on praying to Krishna so that we are properly situated in being able to serve, and then taking it from there on. What is it which is going to allow us to serve? The mood of a servant, humility. So the extent to which we start putting ourselves in the forefront, to that extent, we're going to have problems. So there was this example. Oftentimes, we don't even know what the Vaishnava or the Guru needs. We just offer them what we think is important, because our consciousness does not allow us to see what they need. And as a consequence, the Guru, for example, says he's thirsty. He says, I'm thirsty. Can I have some water? The disciple goes, I made kheer. The Guru says, I want water. No, I made kheer with very special milk. The Guru again says, I want water. The disciple says, no, I made kheer with all kinds of wonderful spices. It's very tasty. It's very thick. I just need water. No, I made kheer. Because I made it, you need to have that. You can't have water. You need to do what I'm asking you to do. Normally, if there is a certain centeredness around what we do, we tend to not being able to see what others need. So being selfless, praying to Krishna so that we could serve nicely, and approaching the Vaishnavas in a prayerful mood, all of this helps. It's better to reinforce the positives. That in turn would prevent us from getting into territories which can harm our devotional service.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Haribo.
Padmavati Nitai Matadasi. When you speak about offenses, now clarifying your situation, clarifying for something, is it something that we shouldn't do in case you see something? Sometimes something wrong has been spoken. So clarifying, is it not good to clarify, or you just
we can clarify? Yes, we can always ask questions, and we can clarify, but then not in a challenging mood. Oftentimes, we may, if the person is very senior, oftentimes we may not understand what they're trying to convey. See, it all depends on where we are situated. The less and less and less of ourselves in the center, greater would be our ability to understand the opposite part. Krishna will give us the intelligence. He says this in the Bhagavad Gita in 10:10, that he would give us the intelligence to come to him. Committing Vaishnava Aparadh means that we can't go to Krishna, which means intelligence is lost. So the greater and greater and greater our effort in trying to put someone else's interest before ours, keeping Krishna in the center, greater would be our ability to see what is required. Lesser would be the need for making offenses. Offenses begin on the black bodily platform. We commit offenses when our false ego interferes. We commit offenses when we start looking at the circumstance and saying, somehow I'm more important than this person. So that's very important.
One more question, Prabhu, sorry. Sometimes if you get little hurt, for no fault of yours, if something comes up, if you get hurt, so can we think, oh, Lord is trying to say something to me? Can we think like that and just forget it and carry on? Or is it okay? Although it is very difficult, but is that the way that we should be looking at?
Processing it as Krishna's gift is paramount because it would allow us to see the mercy coming through.
Okay.
Vaishnavas who are practicing Krishna consciousness seriously will never take offenses. They may observe offenses around themselves.
Yeah.
They would observe offenses. They would see someone as being offensive, but they would never take it to the point where they would hurt the Krishna consciousness of the other person. So in other words, given the fact that preachers, sincere preachers, are motivated by Lord Nityananda, they should remember his behavior as being extraordinarily humble while preaching. He used to fall on the feet of those who refused to take up the chanting of the holy names. So as a consequence, preachers, senior Vaishnavas, gurus, who are sincerely practicing Krishna consciousness, in most cases will not take offenses, even if offenses are committed by the followers. But Bhakti Devi notices this. The dust at the feet of the Vaishnava will never forgive, even though the Vaishnava may forgive. This is the conclusion of Shastra. It destroys the bhakti of the individual who commits offenses. So the point I'm trying to make is, it's upon us. We are not trying to do anyone else a favor. It's upon us for us to correct ourselves in our approach to Vaishnavas. Because we can never offend someone who is senior to us. We can never offend. In other words, we can cause no harm to someone who is highly situated. What harm could be caused to someone who is not on the same plane as us? They can never be harmed. They would never feel that. They would just be able to brush it off and they'll keep walking. But the process of devotion is designed in such a way, and it is very effective, that if it finds people are unqualified and the behavior is quite unqualified, it pushes them out quite naturally. So it's a good thing for us to assume that Krishna has given us this gift. Then we can have some time, we can process it, we can beg for mercy, and we can come out stronger even if it hurts.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare
Sure.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anybody else? Any other question? Okay, so we'll end the session here. And as discussed before, if you could kindly, we could form some kind of a group on WhatsApp, which I'm sure it exists already. And I was just thinking that we could use it effectively for us to be able to, what do you call it? communicate for the next sessions. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.